Welcome back, Soonerscoop.com. I'm George Stoia. I kicked Eddie off the show for today. We've got our do-it-all man, Bob Przybylo, here today. We're going to talk some football, we're going to talk some basketball, and we're going to talk some softball. Lots of news going on in different sports. But, Bob, it's August. We got to start with football. I know you've been out at practice. I've been out at practice. We've all been kind of seeing some different things. Talked to a lot of different players. Talked to Brent last week. What's maybe stood out to you so far going out to practice?
I think the biggest thing for me through the first 2 weeks is I don't know who the starters are on defense.
Yep.
And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. You heard Brent Venables talk last week that outside of Danny Stutzman, we don't know if the front seven might be completely different going into this season. And I sort of feel that way. And it even goes beyond the front seven. You look at a spot like safety. I would assume it's Billy Bowman and Key Lawrence, but then is Peyton Bowen as good as we all think? Is Reggie Pearson an improvement from the grad transfer portal compared to a Trey Morrison from last year? So we don't say competitive depth that we've been hearing about all summer. It feels like it's actually there, and hopefully, clearly, you're hoping that they just keep pushing each other all through camp so that the best guy actually earns the spot.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's so many different position battles, and I know Eddie and I have gone over some of them, but are there any that you're specifically looking at? I know that you look at linebacker. That's one that everybody's talking about. They bring in Connor Neer. Jaron Canick's a guy, year two. Kobe McKenzie looks phenomenal out there. You talk about the defensive line. I mean, there's so many bodies up front that I think they're looking to rotate in. You mentioned the cheetah position. We'll get to that in a second. Corner, you've got a position battle. You mentioned safety. I mean, there's so many different spots. We haven't even talked about the offense, but is there one position battle you're particularly looking at?
I'll look defensive end because, just even goes back to spring because where OU made some moves post-spring with like Connor Neer, DJ Terry, like they made those moves for Trace Ford, Rondell Bothroyd coming out of the winter. And so that allowed the spring for us to talk to Ethan Downs, Reggie Grimes, like, hey, kind of saying what you guys were doing, that wasn't enough. We're going to need you guys to be better. We're going to need the room to be better. And I think going in, I have to believe Downs and Grimes are your starters as of August 10th, but I don't know if they'll be your starters September 2nd. And I definitely don't know if they'll be your starters when we get into conference play. And again, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but if Bothroyd is what we believe he's going to be, you would think he's going to take one of those spots.
Yeah, and they just have so much more depth there. I mean, so many guys. I mean, we've heard all the names, PJ Adebare. You mentioned Rondell Bothroyd. Guys like the Trace Ford. I mean, what's his role going to look like? It just feels like they should be so much better there just because they have more guys. I mean, it felt like last year they just didn't have anybody else other than Grimes and Downs, and Lualu was out there. He played quite a bit, but obviously he's moved inside. Tell me, Bob, though, what do you think of the corner position? Because that's one that I'm really interested in. It seems like they've got several guys. Josiah Wagner. I know you talked to Woody Washington a little bit the other day about him. We had that clip in yesterday's clip. But, what do you think of that room? Gentry Williams. Kendall Dolby's a name that I feel like nobody's talking about. Maybe he's getting some run there. But what do you think about that corner spot?
You have to look Gentry. We talking with Jay Valai last week. It's like, don't wait to be great. That was his message. Gentry this entire time, and it's like this spot is his to take with the departure of Jaden Davis, because I think that would have been the only obstacle, and I think he still would have overcame it anyway. But now you have opposite Woody Washington, someone that's never started a game, and it's something that Brent's talked about. He's not wrong. You feel confident. This is Gentry's time. Josiah, Makari Vickers, they're waiting in the wings. Jacoby Johnson, who just came here a couple months ago. So you've got a lot of young choices, but you need someone like Gentry Williams to already be ready. And that might be tough for someone, who didn't get a lot of run last year. You saw limited action. We think he's got worlds of potential, but can he produce at a high level right from the jump?
Yeah, I mean, corner's one of those spots. I think that they have guys there. It's just some guys that we haven't seen play a whole lot, right? I mean, Gentry Williams hasn't played a ton. Obviously, Josiah Wagner's the true freshman, and then Kendall Dolby, top highly recruited.
I still didn't talk Dolby.
I know, and it's he was a guy that coming from a JUCO. I think there's some high expectations there. I know he was really highly rated out of junior college, but one position I think everybody's thinking about, Bob, and it's always the talk with this team with Brent coming in, is that cheetah spot. And I know you wrote about it this week. I asked Brent, last week. I think it was the second day of practice. Who's working there? What is he looking for at that type of player? So here's Brent Venables talking about that cheetah position.
I think it's all the guys that there's a group of them, and we're trying to develop some both depth and versatility so that you can always keep your best player on the field, players on the field. And then we're really working a lot of different combinations on both sides of the ball. Challenge the coaches we got a lot of guys that have versatility. You don't want to water down anybody because they've got too much on their plate, but the right ones that we feel like maybe are the right ones that can do multiple things, let's give them the opportunity here early in camp, see what they have a knack for, what their acumen is. And but there's a group of them, from Justin and Desan to Peyton and Reggie. Those are the main group of guys.
All right, that was Brent Venables talking about the cheetah position. He named those 4 guys: Justin Harrington, Desan McCulloch, Reggie Pearson, Peyton Bowen. Those seem to be the 4 guys. And I know, Bob, it's going to be a situational basis, right? If it's a 3rd and long, maybe you bring in a Peyton Bowen or you bring in a Reggie Pearson in that spot. I don't know. We'll see what they do there. But I know that you talked to Justin Harrington and Desan McCulloch this past week. What maybe stands out about those guys? And tell me a little bit what you're thinking at the cheetah position.
Yeah, that goes back to my initial statement. I thought Desan McCulloch was the clear starter, but we just know Justin Harrington just looks like a football player. And if he can put it together, there's so much there to like. And you hear him talk, he sounds so much more mature compared to when he first arrived on campus. And you can just tell those 2 are feeding off each other. And that's kind of what you want. It's kind of what you need. But you even had McCulloch just say flat out, I'm learning from Justin. Like, I was taking notes from Harrington throughout spring about this. This is why we do things. Like, you line up this way, I get it, but why do we do it? And then Justin would be there to kind of tell him. I look at McCulloch, I don't know. I guess I thought he would be bigger post-summer.
Yeah.
And again, I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, or if it just is, but it's not as big of a physical difference between the 2 as what I thought it would be coming off of McCullough's sterling freshman season.
Yeah, that position is so interesting because they do so many different things. And obviously Harrington came in as a safety. He's a guy that is probably a little bit more comfortable in coverage than McCulloch. And I think people forget that Desan was a true freshman last year at Indiana. I mean, he's only 19, 20 years old. He doesn't have a ton of playing experience. Yes, he played quite a bit for Indiana, but not playing this position, right? He was a guy that would come in. He was a pass rusher. He led Indiana in sacks last year. So this is a whole new role for him, and I think that's going to be a big learning curve. What do you think of maybe Peyton Bowen getting out there? He feels like a guy that I don't know if he fits the cheetah position necessarily, but he just seems like a guy that they've got to get on the field.
Exactly. Whatever situation presents itself, give Peyton some run, let him see what he can do. Because what's been, we talked to Brent Venables about Peyton Bowen at Big 12 media days, and it almost seemed like he just copied and pasted what he said during the spring.
Yeah.
It's like the moment is never too big for this guy. Even as a true freshman, he translates things into his language so that it makes sense for him. And we saw it throughout spring. He looked like a 5-star. It was like, wow. We were all blown away with his interception. And I remember, Peyton's like, duh, that's what I'm here to do. That's not that big of a deal. And so to have that type of mindset, to have that type of production, it seems very hard that you're going to try to be able to keep that guy off the field.
Yeah, definitely going to be interesting. There's so many guys, so many different spots for OU right now, so many position battles that I'm sure will play out. We're going to be out at practice next week, and we'll break those down. And again, I think guys are going to start to emerge. But Bob, you're our basketball expert. There's been some basketball news this summer.
Even in August.
I know. Even in August, Porter Moser spoke with the media. I think it was it a week ago, week and a half ago, somewhere around there. They lose an assistant, Emmanuel Dildy, to Duke. And Porter Moser spoke last week. We'll jump into who they hired, but first, let's get to Porter Moser, what he said, what he was looking for in an assistant, and then we'll talk about who they hired. So here's Porter Moser talking about what he was looking for when he was trying to place Emmanuel Dildy.
A lot that's going to go into, people that I know, people who knows me. I've had a lot of guys leave, someone that I really feel is going to stay here for some time. Somebody that I know and trust, that knows me, knows my system, is a factor. That's part of it. Not to say that's the end all, but when you lose somebody and they got to start right up, and our workouts are over for the summer, So it's someone that has been, that knows what we're doing, knows what my system, and I've got some guys targeted, but it's tough to lose in this, especially your associate head coach, who all summer you were doing the workouts with, to lose him at this time of year. But and that just shows you a lot about Emmanuel. He was, I knew when I hired him. I mean, I had him at Loyola, very good off, on the court, and I thought his next step was going to be a head coach, but this was an opportunity he felt he couldn't pass up, and but there's some things, getting an assistant coach this late. Our workouts are done, our roster is set. So some of the biggest things important is someone that really, I believe, is going to build this thing with me.
All right, so that was Porter Moser talking about what he was looking for in a new basketball assistant. He ends up hiring Clayton Custer, who, Bob, obviously he's very familiar with, a guy that played for him at Loyola Chicago, worked for him at Loyola Chicago, worked for him at Oklahoma.
The last 2 years.
And so now he's back. Tell us, what does he bring to this staff, and were you surprised at all that he was the guy that Porter called?
I really wasn't, because I know Porter prides himself on all these former assistants becoming head coaches or going to, high profile spots. But eventually he wants stability. Yep. And the only way he was really going to do that, if you don't want to get poached, hire a little young. And that's kind of what he's done here with Clayton Custer, someone he knows for years and years and years. Like, who would know my system better than Clayton? When you're coming off this time of year when you have to make a hire with workouts being over, you're getting ready for school starting, you're not going to find someone this late in the game and okay, you have to teach my system. This is how I do things. This is how I operate. So you go to Clayton Custer, who, it's just funny because he's taking him from the Ramblers. So he's biting the hand that once fed him. But with Custer, you get the youth aspect. You get the fact that he's worked with the returning guys like Ortega, like Lowe's. Like, he's been with them throughout this last season, so he can continue to build on that. And the little unknown, perhaps for some, because of the way everything shook out with Matt Brady last year, when Doc Sadler came in, he wasn't put in a recruiting role. So Clayton Custer went out on the road last year and got his feet wet in doing that. And so that should help the transition a lot better in terms of recruiting 2024, 2025 names, because Custer has he's familiar with them. It should, they might have lost a little bit of ground in the 3-4 months where Custer left the program, but he should be able to just bounce right back. And whoever OU has been targeting, for these next couple of classes, Custer should step in and be able to do the job.
Do you have any concern? I know that you from the outside perspective, you see they lose Dildy. They've lost a couple other assistants now under Porter, and he's not been here that long. Do you have any concern about losing those, or is it a matter of, when Duke calls, you got to go, right?
When Duke calls, you got to go. Go to last year. KT Turner. When Kentucky calls, you got to go. And now he's a head coach at Texas Arlington. David Patrick leaves Sacramento State. It would be more concerning if you saw him leave for roles that are either lateral or even, a step below. But if you're going to Kentucky, you're going to Duke, you're becoming a head coach, those things are going to happen. And it's just up to Porter to do what he's done his entire coaching career, which is make those type of hires in the assistant ranks that he knows, those guys are eventually going to become head coaches. But, that's what I need. I need that type of experience, that type of, knowledge in my room. And even if Clayton Custer isn't quite there yet, he could be. You give him 3 or 4 years in this type of role under Porter Moser here in Norman, you might see Clayton Custer's name as a potential, lead assistant or type of head coach at a lower level school here going down the road. How much pressure is on Porter this year? Because you look at his first 2 seasons and they don't make the NCAA tournament, and that feels like that's the expectation at a place like Oklahoma. Make the NCAA tournament. It's not one of those things where I think everybody says, oh, they got to make the Sweet 16 or they got to make the Final Four like they did with Buddy. But I think people are putting the pressure on a little bit for Porter this year. Is this a year that he's got to make the tournament, you think, or? If you don't, you still need to see more signs of the program going upward. Yeah. And a lot of that, unfortunately, is going to have to come from the portal. And we're going to find out, was this portal class better than the first couple that he's brought in? He feels very confident about it, more athletic. They've got the length. He thinks they've got better scoring. The pace of play. And pace of play is something that's been brought up repeatedly throughout the summer. Javian McCollum coming in at point guard, guys like Rivaldo Soares, guys who have been there before and understand what they're trying to accomplish. John Hughley is my question mark then. A traditional type of center coming from Pittsburgh, he's got to be fast enough. You could have 4 guys playing at a very high speed, but if Hughley can't get up and down the court too, that's going to be a problem. And so I'm very curious to see how these transfers all fit in. On paper, it looks nice. But I was excited about the first 2 classes.
Yeah.
I really was. I thought they had, brought in the right type of pieces to make run in the tournament. But if you have 1 or 2 guys in the portal that don't max out to what you believe they're going to be, it shows up. It shows up from being 15 and 17 compared to like 19 and 13. Just a little 3-4 game swing there. You go from missing NIT compared to being like a 9 or 10 seed in the NCAA tournament. So it has to get corrected this time around.
It's going to be interesting. So many new faces on that team. I know they got, you mentioned a ton of them that came in the portal. Obviously a new assistant. So big year for Porter Moser in basketball. They're still a couple months away. One team, though, that has been very active also in the portal, Bob, and the pressure is not on this coach, Patty Gasso in the softball team.
You're getting a statue. There's no pressure now?
I know. Three-time national champions, or three in a row national titles for the softball team. They go out, Bob. They lose the best pitcher in the country, and everybody's like, oh, no, Jordy Ball's going to Nebraska. What are they going to do? They turn around. They get 3 pitchers in the portal. Obviously, the big one, Kelly Maxwell from Oklahoma State. That was something that even you and I...
In June,
yes. We had kind of heard whispers and rumblings about it, and we're like, surely not, right? Surely we won't get a Bedlam transfer here. And again, they make a big splash with Kelly Maxwell. I mean, how big is that for the softball team? And we'll get into a couple of the others here in a second, but how big is it to go out and get somebody like Maxwell, who's played on the big stage? She's played in big games. Oklahoma State's got a great program, one of the best in the country. So to land Kelly Maxwell feels like a huge one for Patty Gasso and the Sooners.
Patty played the long game. She just wasn't concerned. Sooner or later, Kelly's going to have to make a choice. And so we get to June, we're hearing it. So now it's beginning July, like, all right, I guess something happened. Everything was mended. They're good. Then she hits the portal, like, okay, but wait a minute. Team USA's in Dublin. So nothing's going to happen just yet with Kelly. Then she comes back and is like, just kind of that clock is ticking. You got to be able to make the choice. And there it goes. The go boomer heard throughout the Sooner State. And, I mean, just a huge, huge pickup, right? There's no other way to say it. We've gone from one extreme to the other, right? Because what did Patty talk about all last year? I'm never having a season where Paige Parker has to throw 4,000 innings ever again. Like, I just have to lean on her the entire way. So now we've gone from just having 1 to having 6 pitchers. You have 6 pitchers. I don't know how that's all going to work out, but I know you have to be super excited about whether your 1-2 punch is Maxwell, Nicole May, whether you throw Kirsten Deal out there, Carly Keeney, who we'll get into here in a second. I mean, you got to just feel checked boxes one after another in terms of what those ladies can do in the rotation.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it. Nicole May comes back. She's pitched on the biggest stage. She's been kind of that stable, that one pitcher that you kind of know what you're going to get. She's consistent. Again, she's won multiple national championships. Kirsten Deal is one that was, I think, the number 1 pitcher in the country a couple years ago. We saw a little bit of her last year. It feels like maybe she could be their ace going forward. Who knows? We haven't seen a ton of her to say that yet. And then they go out in the portal, like you said. Kelly Maxwell is going to help them tremendously, but they also get Peyton Monticelli from Wisconsin. I think she was was she a freshman?
She was a freshman, yep.
And then you've got Carly Keeney, who comes from Liberty. And if I remember right, she's the one that upset UCLA.
Yes, she did.
In their regionals. So, I mean, what do you know about Monticelli and Keeney? Again, I'm sure you haven't watched a ton of them, but again, it's just they have so many pitchers now. It's like, who's going to be their ace? Are they going to have an ace? Maybe it's by committee.
Right. You look Monticelli, just an unknown, proven prospect at this point. There's not enough to know what her role is going to be. She did okay for the Badgers, but we'll see how that translates when she gets to this type of level of play. You look at Keeney, that's the one I thought that checked off the boxes. I was like, all right, they're good. They lose Storacco, they lose Ball, they bring in Monticelli, they bring in Keeney, and then you still got May and Deal. You're going to be just fine. Is S.J. Guerin going to be fully healthy, and we'll see what she can do too. That's good enough. With all the offensive firepower you've got coming back, your defense isn't taking a step down. That's enough. So the Maxwell thing, that just puts it over the top. But going back to Keeney, we mentioned the game against the Bruins. She also went 1-0 against OU in 8 innings that very first weekend. So when she had to play, she had to pitch against those upper-level schools, she brought it. And people, 27-12, shouldn't I be concerned? No, because she's not going to have to throw 300 innings. I'm not going to discount the Liberty defense, but I have no idea if they were they clearly weren't as good as the Sooners, and it beats a different level when she gets here. And I just love how that staff rounding into form, and I think it is going to be a question that we'll ask repeatedly. We even asked it last year until Jordy Ball sort of took the reins in April and May. Who is going to be the ace or better one? Do you need one?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. When Jordy left, there's no replacing Jordy Ball, right? I mean, she is the best pitcher in the country. Nebraska got a superstar in her, but man, Oklahoma, I think, did as well as they could to replace her, getting Kelly Maxwell and some of those other girls. So they're going to be fun to watch. Their season's far away, but Love's Field coming up. That's going to be exciting to get out there and kind of check that out. I wonder if they'll have a Kelly Maxwell press conference. I don't know if you've heard anything about that, but that would be interesting to hear from her. I still don't think she's really announced it publicly on her social media. Maybe she retweeted some things or posted something on her Instagram story, but I don't think we've gotten any sort of statement. But Bob, I think that wraps it up for us, unless you've got anything else you want to add.
We're good to go. You mentioned Love's Field. As driving to Porter Moser, driving to football practice at the rugby field where it's real. You're getting to see the progress, and it's just that makes it feel even more real. And it's really coming along.
It looks phenomenal from just the outside. It's going to be fun. I'm sure we'll get a tour of it sometime in the winter or early spring. And I know that the goal is game 1 of next season is going to be played there, correct?
That's the goal. Obviously fall ball will be different, but when you head into 2024, unless something changes, right? That's Love's Field is supposed to kick everything off. Yeah, awesome. Well, make sure you guys check out our store too. Obviously, we still have a ton of these shirts: Sleep, Eat, Run, Roll, Repeat. Obviously, a ton of unofficial 40 gear. You can get your T-shirts online at Soonerscoop.com at the store. And then also make sure you guys look at that promo code Sooner25. You get 25% off your annual subscription to Sooner Scoop. You can get more content like this. Bob's on top of all the hoops. He's got great practice observations right now from camp. Softball news seems to never stop, so we'll have plenty of that. Some big recruitments coming up, some commitments possibly coming up this weekend. You got Jaden Nickens out of Millwood. I'll be there. Yep, Bob will be there. Sounds like Eddie will be there. Obviously, you got Williams Winery coming up on Monday. I won't be there. Yeah, Kansas City. But we'll have plenty of coverage on that. David Stone, August 26th, I believe. Yep. So plenty of stuff coming on Soonerscoop.com. So make sure you guys subscribe. I'm George Stoia. He's Bob Przybylo. We'll see you guys next week as OU continues fall camp for the 2023 season.